Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
My name is Eric, and I'm here with prisoner 247290Z, Michael Kester.
Thank you.
And we have this double feature today is all sorts of things. First of all, it's an experiment, and I think mostly it's an experiment above everything else. But these are two movies about people who want to be famous, I think. I think that's essentially use brutality and force in different ways to be famous. And they're movies that are sort of criticisms of their fame.
Or lack thereof.
What are the two movies?
JCVD and Bronson.
So JCVD is about
Jean-Claude Van Damme.
And Bronson is not about
Charles Bronson.
Right. It's about Charlie Bronson.
It's about
right.
Charlie
It's about the
Bronson.
boxer and not.
He's not a boxer.
Well,
Don't give him a name.
sometimes he boxes.
It's about the prisoner.
Yeah, it's
Charlie
about
Bronson.
Sure. Okay, that's probably more appropriate. So before we talk about what actually happened with this feature today, if you want to skip us rambling about what happened and how this, I think that's an important part of the show.
Yeah.
But if you don't and you just are interested in these two films and want to hear us talk about them, you can use the chapters to skip to the films. We are going to spoil JCVD and we're going to spoil Bronson as well.
I don't think Bronson can be spoiled because it doesn't really end.
I don't think you can even spoil it for other people until you've seen it a few times.
Yep.
I don't even know if having seen this film only once, I could spoil it for you if I wanted to. And JCVD, I don't know. I'm not sure about spoilers.
I think that's spoilable.
This is a buyer beware kind of situation, or listener beware. I guess you don't really buy this show, but you know what I mean. So that's your spoiler warning. There may or may not be spoilers, but you can use the chapters to skip to JCVD or Bronson or the end of the show, because we got to talk about what we're doing next week. Kind of a big deal.
Yeah, we're going to...
little bit of a big deal.
Going to hit up on the 3 digits there.
So before we even discuss JCVD, we did things a little bit differently.
Yeah, we did things a little... I want to go ahead and say we did it wrong, but we're going to truck right on fucking through it.
Well, we had to do the experiment, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a grand experiment. Now, year one of our show, we had, and we refer to this once in a while, so I apologize if I'm being redundant here. We had a dynamic of, and this is the whole way our show started. I moved to the city where you lived and I now live, and we both had a ton of fucking movies. I'd say about 98% of which we'd seen and really agreed on.
Right.
And so we decided every week to just start watching one movie from my collection, one movie from yours that we hadn't seen, that the other person hadn't seen. And we would come on the show and we would talk about the movies. And that started a little rough.
Yeah.
And we continued that experiment well into when we decided that was not a good format for a show. But we wanted to do at least a whole year of that. For year 2, we switched things up, the year we're currently in. And we decided we're going to look at films and try and figure out what is important about the film, what people should walk away from it with. Even if the film itself isn't one of the greatest films of all time, there's certainly information to take away from it that can further your knowledge of film. Since the show has increased in popularity, we've had a lot of people sending us these emails.
Yeah.
They want us to do their
Blade
requests.
Runner. They want us to do Blade Runner.
They do want us to do Blade Runner. But if you've listened to, I don't know, 5 random episodes of our entire, I would say 4 out of 5 shows probably invoke Blade Runner.
Yeah.
So I guess we caved, right? Is that fair to say that's what happened?
We ran into a situation with scheduling where I guess we caved.
We had an opening, is what it was. We sit down to do these schedules, and I think that'll become really apparent when we talk about, these two films. It's even more so about our show, really, than the two films, why we pair films the way we do. But a lot more thought goes into that than you would think.
Yeah.
And sometimes people send us requests, and they don't do our show, so they don't fucking know.
Not their fault.
And these films, they have themes. They go together, but they aren't films that either of us have ever seen. I don't think I actually said that yet.
Right.
But that's what the experiment really is here. Neither of us had seen these films, and we were both kind of interested. What are these movies about?
Yeah.
And someone recommended them, and we said, all right, we have a hole in our schedule because we plan our year in thirds or like quarters, and we decide every single movie we're going to do. So we have a rough idea of what's coming up, and, we're not just winging it week to week. And we had an opening in the schedule, and sometimes when you schedule this stuff, you're just tapped out.
Yeah.
You just don't know what else to pair.
Well, also, I think there's a little bit of the testosterone factor for me where I was like, JCVD, Charles Bronson, let's put them together. But it wasn't even Charles Bronson.
Wait, more testosterone than you thought you were going to get,
Actually,
maybe.
it was a little less.
Do you think so?
JCVD was pulling some kicks.
That's true, too, but it's not Charles Bronson or Charlie Bronson's fault. But yeah, so we gave in to that idea, and I just think, it's not that we don't have enough films to do. We've already built a whole list of films to incorporate in year 3. It's just hard finding a pairing because you kind of have to match the mood. Sometimes we're worried about if someone does this double feature at home, is it going to work? We've had a couple this year where we're worried that listeners actually killed themselves because they watched the 2 movies back to back. But in the name of science, we're performing the grand experiment. And I guess we're going to start with JCVD.
Yes.
So aside from going into this not knowing what the films were really about.
Right.
Not having seen them at all, as opposed to usual when we've seen a film 100 times. Mm-hmm. I don't even know what Jean-Claude Van Damme looks like in a lineup.
Yeah.
If you presented me the cast of The Expendables, I would not know which one was JCVD. I just couldn't pick him out.
I'm going to clue you in. He's not in that.
Well, that would help.
So that's why you wouldn't.
But okay, so this
He'd
explains
be the one not there.
This explains the level of how unaware I am of really action movie stars. I mean, I grew up in the 90s watching Bruce Willis stuff.
Sure.
And that was really my only action star. And that other guy with the head that goes on fire and he whips the chains at you. The Wicker Man, that guy.
I'm completely, I was like you. One time in my life,
yes, sure.
Eric, I was you. But recently with the advent of The Expendables, the Sly Stallone thing.
Yeah, directed that.
Directed and wrote and starred.
Sure.
I love Sly Stallone because I put myself through Rambo. And by the 4th one, I realized he was good and not just stupid. Don't dig the Rambo movies too much. But I decided I'm going to go through the gamut. I'm going to see every action star that's in The Expendables, and then, some JC.
Action stars are the new slashers. They're the slashers of last year.
Some JCVD just because I guess I had... Because he was in some of the other ones. He was paired up with Dolph Lundgren in Universal Soldier.
Sure.
But Dolph Lundgren is my favorite, personally.
Well, who Always Sunny in Philadelphia calls the most underrated actor of all time.
And I have to agree. But the thing about Jean-Claude Van Damme, unlike all the other guys, is he kicks.
He does.
He kicks. That's Jean-Claude Van Damme uses his feet to kick.
Although, oddly, not a ton in this film.
No, well, he doesn't do a lot of what most of Jean-Claude Van Damme is known for in this film.
You mean action?
Well, yeah, he doesn't kick, he doesn't wear berets, and he does a lot of talking. He would never talk in his action films because he doesn't have a very good American dialect.
Right. Well, and as we saw with the production side of things, maybe that's what stopped his films from selling big. We get a little bit of this stuff with his agent, which is really interesting, talking about some of the behind-the-scenes kind of movie making, really the business aspect of things. And these guys churn out movies just like television actors do, really. Much. They take on these projects, and you have to trust your agent that the movie is going to be good, and sometimes your agent doesn't read the fucking script. As I was watching this, I just kept thinking... Agents are the new producers, like I scoff at producers all the time, but it seems like agents fuck people over just as much. The whole Hollywood ecosystem just drives me insane. So to talk about kicks and stuff, to talk about the action, I wondered if this movie would be a good JCVD primer for someone, because they do start the movie. They open with this hearing, this court hearing that he has. It's custody, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's not the action. They open with the thing, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, they open with the child.
Right, it's not the actual opener.
The opener during the credits is a little glimpse into what Jean-Claude Van Damme movies used to be like.
Sure. Well, that's a good point. So we start with that, and then we move into...
real life Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Apparently, which is this hearing. But in the hearing, and I thought this was a really excellent mechanic, they're using as evidence against him all of his films.
Right.
Eye gouging, run over someone's head, this person gets maimed. And just DVD after DVD, and he's sitting there, and that's where they start to establish another thing that I thought was kind of interesting, not to sidetrack too much, but the jump cuts in the film.
Yeah.
Where they will a jump cut is basically where it's the same take, or what appears to be the same take, but just spliced. So everything will just jerk till later in the cut. And if you use that, jump cuts are a really funny thing, because if you use them once in a movie, it looks like you just fucked up in editing. But if you use them a bunch of times, it's suddenly stylistic. It's one of the only editing gimmicks I can think of where you can only get away with it if you do it all the time.
Yeah.
And then it's an acceptable method. You can almost build scenes in that manner. Where it's also a way to get around, well, part of this take didn't work. And unlike like mixing our show, for instance, or assembling music where you can move pieces around and overlap, you can't really do that in a film. You need to use fluid takes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get jump cuts. But stylistically, that can work. Sorry about the weird filmmaking tangent. To get back to what I was saying.
Jean-Claude Van Damme wanted to be more in the studio.
We go from that opening scene of here's what his movies are like to the lawyer listing off his films. So immediately I start thinking, oh, this is going to be an excellent primer for me, a person who has no knowledge of that.
Okay, so first off, I'm sorry, because it really isn't. But at the same time, I didn't like Jean-Claude Van Damme at all, seeing some of the films that he's done. Universal Soldier drove me nuts, and he was the good guy.
Sure.
I just couldn't stand him. He was in Street Fighter, which I can't
understand as well.
I don't understand this guy. I think it's because he never talks. I think it's because he shows up and kicks.
Right.
And I'm like, who the fuck are you to walk in here and kick everybody?
Sure.
I don't even know what your character's name is. But this film, I think, may be a good primer in that it gives you a person behind the kicking.
Right.
It puts a face to the foot. You know what I mean?
Right. So you think now that I have someone to kind of identify, now that I'm like, oh, JCVD, I know who that is.
Yeah.
He will become apparent through his characters when he's not actually there.
I think you'll at least, when he shows up, you'll at least go, oh, that's the guy from JCVD. I know what he's like as a human being.
Right.
Instead of, oh, he's kicking, and he's out of the room.
When I don't like to go into these episodes we do as a person who doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, but maybe other people in the audience who have never fucking seen a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie can identify with me here. So just to see if I understand you correctly, you would say that this is pretty much the antithesis of the rest of his roles.
Pretty much, yeah.
Very much separate.
There's less kicking and more talking.
Yeah.
And he's got, there's that weird scene where he gets elevated up into the lighting rig and sobs.
Right.
I mean, Jean-Claude Van Damme, he doesn't even smile, let alone fucking sob because of how sad his life is.
Well, the movie goes through great strides to show you that he's a human being.
And an actor, furthermore.
Before we get too self-aware, because that's a huge component of this film, and one, by the way, where I actually know what the hell I'm talking about. This premise, and maybe it's because you and I just recently rewatched Dog Day Afternoon, and this movie is sort of Dog Day Afternoon.
Yeah, pretty much.
The premise is really strange because it sets you up once you get into the actual plot, which I was wondering if they would really do a plot, unlike one of the other movies we watched in this feature. It's very plot heavy, and I think almost intriguing in the beginning. I mean, I really like going in and going, why is Jean-Claude Van Damme robbing a post office? Which is weird too, maybe for our foreign listeners. I don't know how post offices work around the world, but in the United States, a post office has like $300.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not over here. You would rob a bank, as in Dog Day Afternoon. You don't rob post offices. So it's this weird thing. And then I'm thinking, why would a movie star rob a post office? And he's asking for $1 million. It doesn't make any sense. So that's really intriguing to me. Of course, and probably too soon, at least for my taste, they explain to us why that's happening. And you called that out. You know, maybe it's the perfect time.
Yeah.
Because as soon as the audience kind of figures out what's going on, you don't want to string them along and make them guess.
I'm glad that they kind of tell you right away, because one of the things I despise in film is when you can spot where the twist is going to be, and they still act like you don't know. Because then you get to the end of the film and they go, here's the twist, and it's fucking Fight Club, and you're just annoyed.
I think Fight Club's a bad example. Do you really know by the time that... Well, we don't need to talk about Fight Club. You don't ever want to draw on a twist past the point where your audience knows, unless you're going to trick them again. Right. Although that's too much what a twisting for me.
Mind freak.
But there's just no point at that juncture where someone already understands what's coming. If you show up right at that moment and say, oh, surprise, you got it right. And then you kind of feel as an audience member like, hey, I got it right. Good for me. But if they wait till the end, you're like, I knew that 45 minutes ago. What the fuck are you doing? It was strange even to see one of the characters, basically, from Dog Day Afternoon. I mean, you know, we had to make jokes about the, when they sent the two guys in naked.
Right.
Yeah, the line about, you know, two homosexuals robbing the bank being kind of the gag there. Maybe that was one of the more subtle and one of, I guess I would say, the farer reaches. But the setup... And
Sal,
the guy who looks exactly like Sal. Do you think they drew inspiration for Dog Day Afternoon, or is it possible that this is just a long string of coincidences?
I think that it always boils down to the fact that your renegade fucking bank robber partner has to have long hair and a high forehead.
Well, and you have a renegade bank partner.
Yeah.
This is a show that loves film cliches, loves to talk about film cliches. But we never really examined the hostage situation in its most typical form. We talked about Hostage on the show, and we had a lot to talk about because that was another movie that, like this one, and even more so like Bronson, had action content and then wrapped it in art house, aesthetic.
Burning house
art house aesthetic. And when we talked about Dog Day Afternoon, there was so much to talk about there. We've never really talked about the typical hostage setup. But you get renegade partner, and it's such a cliche.
It's almost every. The thing is, and we've discussed this before, in any given situation with film, usually things are okay until someone breaks the rules.
Yes.
Someone diverts from the plan, someone does something they're not supposed to. And that is embodied in hostage situations by the leader, who is always a little bit, he's got a plan, but he's a little kind of reserved and afraid and submissive. And he brings in a hired gun who, without fail, has long hair and a high forehead.
Yeah, always.
And about halfway
it was kind of Hostage, too, right? I mean, that's Ben Forrester.
And there's another film, too, called The Lookout, where there's a guy with long hair and a high forehead robbing a bank. And in this film, there's a guy, long hair, high forehead, shows up, says, listen, if you're going to be a shitty leader, I'm going to have to take over because I'm not afraid to kill somebody. That's the fucking line.
Sure,
it's
that's
always,
it.
I'm not afraid to do what I have to do.
Right.
Because they're always the one that's like, I'm in this for the blood. I'm in this for the glory.
Yeah.
And then there's the one guy who plans the bank robbery because he needs cash.
Sure. Well, they're the part of the population we talk about so frequently when we discuss, especially World War II or any war stuff, where most soldiers are just people, but there is that small percent that are just crazy and want to kill people. And it's a tiny percent, but somehow it's always 1/2 or 1/3 of the group robbing the bank. Always. They're always there. That cliche may drive you nuts, but the one that always gets me, and it's just because I don't like seeing it, it doesn't interest me, is where they force the captors to talk to their loved ones.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, here we get Jean-Claude Van Damme's mother on the phone, and maybe it's because I don't understand the purpose of scenes like that. Here it's probably to make him more human.
Yeah.
He wants to talk to his mom, but it always seems like a simple, cheap way to raise the stakes at the same time as giving humanity to your character.
Yeah.
Just when the hostage taker is feeling too much like a monster, you bring their girlfriend in, or their wife, or their kids, or whatever. And then you go as an audience member, oh, they're a human being. They're like me. I can identify more. This movie has so many more layers. But it's the same shit. You just get his mom to come in and talk to him on the phone, and he's going to look sad. I just always know what's coming. I guess it's probably the same reason you don't like the renegade partner. You see it a mile away.
Well, it bothers me because bank robberies could go so smoothly.
If it weren't for the renegade partner.
If there wasn't some douche pot trying to kill off every little woman and child in the room, they might be able to get off from dying.
So in being a movie sort of about heists, it does fall prey to some of that stuff. But I think they make some really clever choices. I've always been intrigued by when you rob a bank in a film, bank robbers always think they're going to get away. And the point where you can't get away, Reservoir Dogs does this really well, even though it doesn't cover the heist a whole lot. It's mostly the aftermath. But you get this idea that they got in there, they kind of got the money or the jewels or whatever, and then shit started to go down right as they were leaving. That's when the cops came in and the whole thing got crazy and they left. At the point where there's a media circus, which often happens in hostage movies, that's it. There's no getting out. You're not going to get a jet or a car to drive you away. It's never happened. I would be really interested in if anybody knows about these actual cases where the captors were able to work out a deal with the hostage negotiators and get a car and actually left. doubleFeatureShow@gmail.com. But I'm pretty sure that has never happened in the existence of the hostage situation. Here they come up with kind of a good idea.
It's a brilliant idea.
It's to exploit having Jean-Claude Van Damme.
It's a happy accident, too.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
What ends up happening is Jean-Claude Van Damme goes into this bank post office because he needs money because he's hard up.
Right.
I mean, that's the case is he's down and out because he's a failing actor.
Right.
He goes in and he walks in on what is already a bank robbery, a post office robbery. I'm going to call it a bank robbery.
That's fine.
And then he gets taken hostage. There's a gunfire, and when the police come over to investigate, they happen to see him through the window, pushing a cabinet in front of the now shattered glass. And that immediately clicks in their head as Jean-Claude Van Damme is robbing.
When I think there's two clever things in what you said. One is that this idea then appears, rather than the captors themselves be known, talk to the negotiator, He used Jean-Claude Van Damme. So let's remove him as the star for a second to really narrow down what we're talking about here. Before any negotiations are made, before we know what the robbers look like, the robbers can pin one of the hostages as the captor. So they push Jean-Claude Van Damme out there, but just to expand this a little bit, let's just say you take one of your hostages, you force them on the phone to make all the negotiations and what have you, and then the robbers are released as hostages themselves, because always hostages are going to get negotiated away. That's the point. That's what all these movies do. They want to get the people out of the house, out of the bank, out of the post office. And so when the police outside start asking, well, give us a hostage, you give up the bank robbers. I just think that's brilliant. That probably wouldn't actually work in practice because I'm sure they question the shit out of these people. But that at least gets you out of the building. And I think it's one of the most believable premises for how these people are going to get away. Because as soon as a hostage movie starts, no one ever thinks the robbers are actually going to get away with it, ever. The other thing you hit on I really like is that they explain what he's doing there with the fact that, you know, they've taken him hostage and they're forcing him to talk and do the negotiations or whatever. But he says something on the phone that's kind of interesting. He says, you know, I got to say this thing here about sending money to my lawyers in LA because that's more believable. So we think, all right, we're supposed to believe he's smart or whatever. As we learn more about his financial situation, he actually does need that money to go to his lawyers. And ultimately, I think that's why he ends up in prison, you know, extortion. Mm-hmm. It's just clever when you can look at one situation like that through several different perspectives and see that the situation is much different than you thought it was the previous time, 2 or 3 times. A movie that's about an action superstar usually wouldn't get away with something like that, but I think this film pulls it off really nicely.
Yeah.
Most of the humor in the movie is derived from the fact that it's self-referential. Mm-hmm. It's about Jean-Claude Van Damme, the man, pretending to be a real person. He is an actor, acting as himself in a movie referring to the fact he's in movies, but it isn't about movies. It's also
a movie named after him.
Yeah, they're just laying it on so heavily. There's a couple other things that are a little funny. I mean, I think the caper music is funny throughout. Yeah. I didn't know that a triangle could really be an important part of music. But they use that fucking,
Integral.
Yeah, that's the word. They use it so much in the score, and I actually really like the score of the movie. We're pulling off a heist. What's going on here? People are scheming. We're making plans. But there's also the candid camera joke. Why do people still make candid camera jokes?
I feel like candid camera is unfortunately going to be a permanent staple of pop culture. And I said this before to you, but I'm going to recant this so that it was here first.
Okay.
It's going to pop back up. It's going to be back on television just like fucking Deal or No Deal.
Right.
It's just going to show up again. It'll be hosted by fucking Jeff Foxworthy or some bullshit Jean-Claude Van Damme, right?
We'll host it.
Yeah.
I actually really liked that whole weird period of people from the Aristocrats hosting game shows on. Did you notice that? It's Howie Mandel, it's Bob Saget, it's Penn Jillette did Identity. And then you have Drew Carey taking over The Price is Right, which is really cool because he's just an awesome person and a fucking libertarian and a great guy. But it was weird to see this whole strange circle of, hey, here's comedians that were in the Aristocrats. Now they're doing game shows on television. It's weird to see the different waves of TV. And I think you're right. That stuff could totally come back. You know, when we get sick of reality TV again and American Idol and we go back to game shows some more. The candid camera thing is just weird to me because it hasn't been here in America for fucking ever. And yet people still look around, hey, am I on candid camera? Like, have you seen candid camera on TV? Because it's not there.
It's just a weird euphemism for this can't really be happening.
Right.
It's one of those things.
It seems like they would just say that rather than pay a licensing fee to candid camera every time someone makes that joke. That's a costly joke. My other hypothesis that I like much more is that they were in a country that, as you know, a lot of time American television gets exported into other countries. And it took so
long to get over there. They're still in the 80s.
I really like that they're just getting candid camera. I really enjoy that. It could also say something about Jean-Claude Van Damme's film career, that he knows so little about what's actually happening in popular America and mainstream America that he might think candid camera is actually a relevant thing. Just shows how out of touch he is and how unsuccessful he's been. So I guess that brings us to the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
We have to talk about self-aware, self-referential films about and starring and written by, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
Their stars. Jean-Claude Van Damme, JCVD, is a perfect example. But earlier, actually within the last couple of years, we saw My Name is Bruce,
right.
A film about Bruce Campbell.
Well, loosely.
Well, that's the thing, is they're always loosely about, and they're always nod and wink and elbow. And you know from what I've been telling you about sincerity in old school films, I really enjoy that kind of sincerity, and I like when things are funny when they're not necessarily supposed to be, rather than 9 different levels of ironic.
Right.
So you've seen a bunch of these films. Where do you think this falls on the level of nodding and winking and being self-referential? Is there too much? Is it...
I think that it's almost okay. It's a little too much.
A little bit.
I think the most egregious part is when he's lifted up.
Sure.
Lifted up to the lighting rig. That just rubbed me the wrong way because I felt like that was too obviously hitting me over the head with the fact that he was down and out and this is a different thing. This is about him and not about kicking.
Well, there comes a point where you're not really sure if the film is serious about that. And I think the film has to be serious about that scene. But you need to know how serious they want you to take it. Or maybe you don't. Maybe I'm totally off base here. I'm not really sure. But you're right. The moment where he floats up above the set and kind of breaks the fourth wall, but not really. Here's how it's different. He could break the fourth wall and turn to the audience and go, I know this is a movie. But it's almost another level beyond that. He gives a scene directly to the audience, which I guess you could argue is just him thinking out loud or to the camera. Because when he lowers back down, he's put right back into the scene. So maybe that's just what he's thinking. I guess that's what that's supposed to be. But he is looking directly to us. He's above the set. He's talking. So that's what I'm talking about with breaking the fourth wall. They've shown us visually that that's what they're trying to do. But then he starts talking to us about how this isn't a film, how precious life is. You know, he talks to us about his career, all this stuff that he hasn't yet given us in the movie that he wants to talk about. And then discusses how precious life is and how he hopes that no one gets shot when he goes back down there and this situation resolves. I feel as if it's just a line. There is a point where you can pat your audience on the back, and there's a point where you can do it a little too much. But when you have a film like JCVD, it's clearly targeted towards his audience. It's people who really like him. I haven't seen him, and you're not huge on his stuff, so maybe we're the wrong people to talk about. Possible. And that's part of the grand experiment here and why this isn't as focused as our normal shows. But I wonder if that's delivering really what people want. The same thing happened with My Name is Bruce. It's a movie that celebrates Bruce Campbell. It's also a story about how Bruce Campbell is just an actor, but he's thrown into a situation that requires him to be as he is in the movies. So there's references to a lot of his movies. There's references to a fake movie that is much like the movies he has made. It's a commentary on his career. So I think those are all, that's the checklist of building that kind of movie. You want to comment on the career. You want to make some jokes about it. You want to also specifically reference the films. And I think with JCVD, they want to elevate Jean-Claude Van Damme as not just an actor, as maybe someone with range, as maybe somebody who is a human being. I almost feel like it's a larger commentary on how you treat actors when you see them, when you're celebrities.
Yeah, that's in there too.
You see a lot of different people run into him right from the opening, you know, from like the third or fourth scene, the guys with cameras. They want to take pictures with him. There's that awkward moment when, you know, you see a celebrity and you want to get the picture taken, but as an audience member, you don't want to be an asshole and bother them all the time. And I wonder if, do you think the film is commenting just as much on that as it is specifically saying, is it using JCVD as a vehicle to talk about that stuff, or is it commenting on him specifically?
I think that it's probably pointed more toward him than I would like.
Yeah.
Because it takes place in Belgium, which is, you know, hometown.
Where JCVD is, as they say, the only celebrity.
Yeah.
You know, he is their hero.
So I think it's kind of commenting on him coming back to his roots and having a little bit too much Hollywood rub off on him.
All right. Well, I think that establishes some of our trust in him as well. We're trying to see the situation he's in, identify with him so that he can tell us how he feels as a celebrity, that maybe we idolize our celebrities too much, or maybe we hound them, or more importantly, more specifically, I think, it's okay to hound the celebrities and get your picture taken, but sometimes they need a nap.
Yeah.
And you can't always be let down when they aren't, you know, at the top of their game. They're real people too, and they have to like take a break, and sometimes they just want to eat a sandwich and be left alone. So to go really to my last point on the film, there's not a lot of action in this film.
There's not.
I was surprised by that. Do you think that's kind of the point?
I think that, yeah, the speech that he gives on the ceiling, where he talks about this is real life, this isn't, you know, this isn't an action movie.
Right.
And I think that's the case. He doesn't really do a whole lot of kicking, and he kicks the cigarette out of the guy's mouth.
Yeah.
In a cool scene. But other than that, there's just the one scene at the end, and even that ends up not being real life.
Well, to go back to My Name is Bruce, it would be interesting to look at these films back to back, and why I don't think that would really make a great double feature is because they do the complete opposite. I mean, maybe for our show, we could talk about that or whatever. We're clearly doing just fine doing that now. But My Name is Bruce is about a story in which real life starts to mimic someone's career, whether that's would actually happen or not. And there's a lot of commentary specifically on his career. Whereas this is a story about how much real life is not the movies. I mean, it hits you over the head with that stuff. It's really not the movies. You can't kick guns out of people's hands. They do give you a brief glimpse at the very end, and what I think is actually a pretty good scene.
Yeah, I love it.
As much as the gimmick is like obnoxious and it's a film reel thing and whatever, he kicks the gun away from the guy, and then he really hams it up, which is perfect because that's actually what I thought the movie was going to be the whole time, and I'm almost a little relieved it's not. But he turns to the audience, he's flexing his muscles, and then he goes on to high-five the SWAT team, which is just perfect. But they come back to real life, and you can see that was almost him going, you know what, I have to make a move here.
Yeah.
And he like elbows the guy and then falls on the floor, and the SWAT team just nails him.
And then he gets arrested for extortion and goes to prison.
Because that's what would really happen.
Yep.
Bronson was a very confusing experience for us.
Yeah, it was rough.
I think that is because we both had some inkling there would be at least a little bit of Death Wish Bronson in there. This is, I think, the best thing we can do for our audience. And that's part of the reason that this double feature kind of bothers me. I'm afraid that people are going to see the title and go, oh, 2 movies that are self-referential about actors. And if you did that, by the time you get to Bronson, you're going to be really confused.
Yeah.
And so just in watching these movies, that's absolutely nothing wrong with Bronson. It's not like it misled us.
Right.
It's just when you pair 2 movies back to back, you say things without actually physically saying them about what the movies might be. Sure. You give people this impression. Another thing that's just really hard, when we pick out our schedule, we have to think about stuff like that people don't go into our conversation anticipating it to be about something completely different. Or for a lot of people that actually follow the films, as we're doing them on the show, see them the week before we do it. I don't want those poor people to be confused.
Right.
So when I talked about an action film wrapped in a package of art, I think Bronson is much more exemplary of that than JCVD was. I mean, this movie, and I should give it credit for that, because when do you see a movie that's about a guy who fights and gets into trouble, but is, I hesitate to use the word pretentious because it sounds so mean, but it is very artistic, almost in a way that it pushes the audience away. Yeah. It's a movie about fighting and art, which is very strange and not a combination you would expect from the subject matter. The movie is about, well, I guess they said it was the UK's most well-known prisoner. Right. Here's a guy, and from an action perspective, what I really enjoyed is never knowing when he was going to just flip out and punch someone. Yeah. The lead actor does a really great job of being charismatic. From the very beginning, you have no idea what the fuck is happening. Mm-hmm. You're kind of enjoying following him around. Right. He just goes insane. He has these moments where he'll be speaking to someone, normal conversation, and for seemingly no reason, flip out and start punching everyone. So we know right from the beginning that he's got some sort of problem with violence. Right. He's in and out of prison. He kind of picks up a thing as a boxer or maybe just as a fighter. Yeah. I don't know his career very well. As a puncher.
Where Jean-Claude Van Damme would kick, this guy just punches.
Well, and that's when he takes up the name of Charlie Bronson.
Right.
I'm a little curious about what seems to be an addiction not only to violence, but to prisons. Yeah. Do you get the feeling that he feels more at home in the prisons?
Yeah, it seems like he's got this comfort level of prisons. Yeah. It comes with his liability to start punching. Sure. To start fighting. In prison, you can get away with that. Yeah. Because where are they going to put you?
Yeah, right.
Prison?
Yeah.
Solitary, I guess.
So do you think part of that is that he is drawn to violence, and in prison he can be as violent as he wants?
He can be himself. He can be all the Charlie Bronson that he wants to be.
It's strange to hear him talk about prison and talk about it as hotels. Of course, not how an average audience member probably thinks of prison. But here's someone who's in and out of prison so much that he starts to joke about it being hotels. It's where he feels home. It's vacations for him. Yeah. It's more comfortable for him. Almost escape in a way, where he can stop worrying about what to do for a job and real life, and he can just spend all of his time fighting. As he gets out, I start to think about the Shawshank Redemption kind of you've seen Shawshank Redemption. Yeah. There's a scene from it, and I really won't talk about it. If you've seen it, you'll know what I'm saying, but let me just make it more clear for people who haven't. There's an idea in Shawshank Redemption that after spending a certain amount of time in prison, an individual cannot function properly outside of the prison environment. If you spend your whole life on a farm, when you come to the city, you might not be able to adapt. You might not be able to live city life. And a prison is much more of an extreme version of that example. It's an environment that's tightly regimented. It's the same people over and over. You develop social circles. You learn to adapt to prison life, really. You learn to live your life that way. And a lot of people are in there for a long fucking time. You get a life sentence. Maybe you get out early. You could be in there most of your life. Here's somebody who's been in there, 30 years or something. I mean, maybe in and out of prison systems, but he's been there a long goddamn time. And I start to think about the idea of reforming prisoners, because that's the intent of the prison system, right?
Right.
Keep people safe and reform the prisoners. But they get out and they can't really adapt to life. I mean, that is a problem, right?
It's got to be.
What do you do about that? Is there anything that can be done about that? Because you got to keep people in the prison. I mean,
I guess in prison they try to do the rehabilitation programs.
Sure.
Like in this film, they have Bronson sew.
Yeah, right.
To learn to sew. So he
or
can
in
get
the
a
last
job.
film, JCVD teaches people how to kick.
Exactly.
Which maybe isn't really what you need. But yeah, there are these different schedules. Prisoners go outside, they play sports, they try and get them doing things essentially that normal people do.
Normal people things.
But you would at least agree that there's definitely a problem there.
Yeah.
So what does that say then about solitary? If some people can't function in the normal world after spending 30 years in prison, does solitary really help anybody?
I think solitary might just be a defense mechanism for the rest of the prisoners.
For the other prisoners, right.
I mean, in this case, it is.
Yeah, I mean, this guy spends so much time in solitary, and you see how that affects him. You start to wonder if it's causing more harm than good. I mean, it has to be causing more harm than good. He can't even talk to someone for 5 minutes without punching them in the face and freaking out. Part of that is the heightened theatrics of this, but he's covering himself naked in paint and starting giant prison riots. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a nutcase.
Or he's covering himself in paint and talking in a weird theater with eye makeup on.
He's either a complicated artist that no one understands, or he's a total lunatic, or maybe both.
Some hybrid.
One of the mechanisms the film uses to tell the story is this stage show that it cuts to. And I love the infinite black space that's used. A lot of times you see infinite white space. It's something that became really popular for, the Mac and PC commercials. Bullshit does it. A lot of different places use it. But here it's infinite black space. It seems really lonely, isolated. He's there by himself. Even when he's giving the stage show, at first there's a big audience reaction. But the second time they cut to the stage show, he says something and no one reacts.
Yeah.
And you start to wonder, is he there by himself? So I was curious what you thought of the stage show aspect, what you think that represents, or why the film is showing it to us, essentially. I mean, is that an inner monologue, or what do you think that is?
I think it's an inner monologue. I think it's some attempt for the filmmakers to try to put an explanation towards what this guy's doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know much about real Charlie Bronson over there across the pond in prison, but I would imagine that he's probably not quite that articulate. And if he is, then maybe they're trying to represent him correctly.
Sure.
And if he's
true.
not, maybe they're trying to put a positive spin on a very negatively portrayed dude.
Well, they're trying to show the story of a brute, and I think they need to use art to show that story. Otherwise, he's just punching a lot of people.
Yeah.
To me, it makes sense in looking at this as a prison film because it's almost like the appeals board. Way back, we did 12 Monkeys, and you sort of had a nod to the appeals board there where someone's in prison and then they go to see, a long line of people. I don't think we've really done a lot of prison-oriented films here, but, when you're up for parole, you go and you talk to people, and it almost takes place of that because we don't really see that happening to him in his literal story. But we see him making his case to the audience, imaginary or not, trying to tell the story and explain not really his side of it, but explain why he did the things he did and that he understands that they're not okay, but he did them anyways. Ultimately, I think what it accomplishes and what it's trying to say is that this man wants to be famous.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to be the most direct. It accomplishes a lot of different things, but that is the most direct one. He wants to be famous. He wants to have an audience, and maybe even just sitting inside his cell alone, spending time in his head, which is the craziest fucking place you can be. He's telling people about his journey in a theatrical way, in an artistic way, in a way that is going to, that he has an audience. Mm-hmm. He's imagining himself as already famous, and this is his audience that he is speaking to. And being the most famous prisoner in all of the UK, in a way, he's kind of accomplished that by basically contributing nothing of real value to society.
Well, yeah, by what he says, he's doing the only thing he's good at, which I guess is knocking people to the floor. Other than that, he's not contributing anything other than a few bloody noses. Like, I don't know, Jean-Claude Van Damme.
If only he had spent some time on the screen or in Death Wish, maybe he could have really brought us something tangible. Big show coming up next time.
Yeah.
Big show. But arbitrarily big show. It's just a number. It doesn't actually.
Giant show of. It's the same.
It's an extra. It's
going to be exactly the same as every other show, except this is going to be our 100th show.
Yeah, a lot of people don't make it this far. A lot of people don't make it to show number 34, so that doesn't really mean anything. We're not going to have much of an anniversary party on the show because we're going to do that for our 104th episode.
Right.
Technically, that'll be 2 years of doing the show. So that'll be it. That'll be we've done double the amount of shows the last time we had one of those. And I'm feeling Faster Pussycat and Mean Girls.
Yeah, that's happening. But not next time.
Next time, I think it's finally time to talk about David Lynch.
I guess so.
So we'll do David Lynch, which is going to be something that's uncomfortable because you don't know a lot of David Lynch, and I'm relatively new, although I really like some of the David Lynch stuff. We're going to pair it with another David Fincher movie, which I think will give us exactly the right mood to encounter David Lynch for the first time. Maybe it's one of those double features that'll be better to watch if you have 6 hours of your time to kill. I mean, it'll be better because of the mood and pacing to watch, then it'll actually make sense to talk about the two films back to back, but we're going to do that anyways.
Right. We're going to do Blue Velvet and The Game.
So earlier this week, we got donations from Linda, and we got a donation from Nathan as well. And, we got an email from Gary. We assigned him the job of tightrope maintenance specialist last time. Gary wanted to let us know that we'd already made him the Turtle Boy, and in his email, he said he refused to give up the job. So we have an opening as tightrope maintenance specialist, which normally I would give to Nathan because he has a penis. But I'm going to give it to Linda and stick Nathan in the burlesque show. How's that for some spontaneity? You can send us a donation by going to donate.doublefeatureshow.com. We could actually really use them right now because I'm pretty sure our building is being bulldozed or they're going to burn it down and put it in a parking lot or something. So we got to get the fuck out of here and find another space. Donate.doublefeatureshow.com. And actually, if you don't have any money to give us, but still want us to get some money, you can sign up for a free Audible subscription at bookshow.doublefeatureshow.com, which doesn't cost you any money, but when you sign up, Audible gives us some money, so that helps us out a lot too. We have a website, doublefeatureshow.com, of course, and we have an email address, doublefeatureshow@gmail.com. This was JCVD and Bronson. You wanted us to perform the experiment, so we did.
Watch more fucking film.